Welcome to Bounce, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of product teams, the challenges they face, and the incredible stories of resilience that emerge. I'm Mollie Cox, your co-host, a product designer with a knack for navigating through the storms of creativity.
And I'm your co-host, Claire Flowers, a product manager who's seen it all, the highs, the lows, and everything in between.
Each week, we'll bring you tales of product traumas, those moments that test our limits, they push our boundaries, and sometimes bring us to our knees.
We're talking about career flops and follies and those pivotal moments when everything seems to fall apart.
But as we know, the harder you fall, the higher you bounce. We'll explore with our guests their toughest challenges,
The actions they took to overcome them.
and how these experiences have shaped their careers and continue to impact them today.
So join us in this journey of resilience, growth, and bouncing back stronger than ever.
Well, thanks for joining us, Fo. For everyone who's listening, Fo has been a director of product operations in B2B SaaS startups across fintechs. You've been in sports tech and MarTech, also a huge believer in design systems that scale and making product teams more efficient, which we love to hear. And I know Fo loves nothing better than to talk about product ops, which is what we are here to do today. I am your host, Mollie Cox, I'm actually your co-host because our other co-host, Claire, is sitting right directly.
You can just I just need co-host credits. We all know who the talent here is on this podcast.
I am your host, and there happens to be a co-host that happens to be a product manager named Claire. And again, today we have Fo joining us. Fo, to kick this off, you being in product ops, I think there could be a natural question that a lot of people have around product, especially those that may be just entering their career in product teams. What is product operations? But before you answer that, would love to hear a little bit about your background and how you very specifically landed in product ops.
Sure. So before we get into that, let me define product ops,
Please.
because I think it is difficult for many folks to know what it means. Operations is used in so many functions when you talk about technology and working in startups. So product ops is really, it's a discipline, and it's the discipline of helping your product function scale effectively by surrounding your teams, whether that's product managers, design, PMM, with all of the essential inputs that allow them to do things like set strategy, prioritize rapidly, and streamline their ways of working. At the end of the day, product operations is the rigor that allows organizations to go faster and to make better product decisions. Now, that's a mouthful, right? So I always talk about product ops being the extra set of hands, with a set of hands that put structures in place to make your lives better as designers and as product managers. And quite honestly, I kind of fell into this discipline a little bit sideways. I think if you talk to most folks in product ops, no matter what their role is, we've come upon it because we saw a problem, and a problem that needed to be solved. And somebody looked at us and said, well, you saw the problem. Do you want to do something about it? And when I was off that, I was working for a company called Kasasa in fintech. And I said, absolutely, I would like to solve this problem because this is a terrible way of existing and we shouldn't exist this way. And so for me, it was about solving the problems faced in front of me. And most of the product ops folks you talk to are going to say something very, very similar. It's a very new discipline. It's been around maybe 10 years or so. And if you look out there in the world, there are multiple ways that it manifests. There are some organizations that are closer to the model that I behold, which is really one that focuses on product analytics, which delivers things like business and data insights. It focuses on customer and market insights. And then you've got these process and practices piece that work on tooling and system and ways of work. And then there are other companies that will fold in things like enablement into product operations. So there's some different flavors out there, but I think the big thing about working in the space and in working with this discipline is making sure you understand the context on the ground for the business and for the teams, and that you're adapting your systems to meet them where they are.
So with product ops, a funny thing has been happening in design as well, which I'm sure you've seen along the path, is design is also starting to get a discipline, which is design ops, right? So that individual who helps with team processes, the tooling to get everything into place. It seems like every department now somehow, somewhere has their own little flavor of operations, and it just gets more granular. But I feel like having worked directly with product ops, it's much bigger than just processes, like you just said. But where have you found sometimes in rolling into this side of product, really those moments where there's overlap that's happening, say with design, and I need design ops, and I think I want to do these
Yeah.
things. Where is some of that overlap
Mhm.
happening that you see?
Yeah, it largely happens as a function of scaling. So when you think of these independent functions breaking out, you normally start when an organization begins to scale, they'll bring in a product operations manager, and that person is a one-stop shop. They do everything. They cover the software development lifecycle with engineering. They will cover the release cycle with product marketing. They will put all the systems in place to capture the discovery insights for PM, for product managers, and they'll work with design on design systems. And then as an organization gets bigger, right, in the move from like 100 million to 500 million, we start to see scaling. And that is the moment where I typically see things break out and that overlaps start to disappear, right? Because that moment in time, you start to recognize it takes more than one body to do this work, and the work becomes more and more customized the bigger the organization gets because you're supporting more and more people. So where I see that overlap exist really is normally in the 50 million to like 120 million ARR. That's kind of the business size that I see the overlap existing, and it differs depending on the product that we're talking about. So if you're talking about a product that has a large user interface, you're probably going to see some overlap between product operations and the early stages of design ops around things like design system. So figuring out what is the right design system, how do we roll it out, how do we get adoption for it, right? How do we have it embedded in the ways we work? There's going to be overlap there between those two parties on making sure we've got the right players in the room and making sure the structure is easy and simple to follow along with. But at a certain point, which is right around 100 million ARR, you'll see them break out and they'll become completely distinct at that point, and different orgs, because they'll have different stakeholders at the end of the day. And then you'll start to see product ops typically pivot and say, we serve product management, and you'll see design ops fit and say, we serve product design. And honestly, it comes down to scaling at the end of the day.
Do you, coming into these, do you
Mhm.
ever experience resistance in it? Let's say there's never been a product ops person
Mhm.
at a company, and you're coming in, you're new, people maybe don't understand the role or the
Mhm.
function of product ops. What are those key points of, like, if any,
Mhm.
resistance or friction that you've experienced?
I believe there's no resistance whatsoever. I've never run into that
Zero.
in software.
We're the Borg. There's none. We just immediately mind meld,
Just
and that's where we go.
assimilate.
So I've started product ops functions and teams at 3 different B2B SaaS companies, all in different domains. At every single one of them, I was the first person. And in every single one of them, I had very deep and very extreme resistance from stakeholders. The reality is, if you've never worked with a role before and it's a net new role, you don't know what it can do. If you look at similar roles out there like content design, that's another newer industry role that is also facing some similar friction because people look at it and they say, well, I'm a designer, that's part of my job, or I'm a copywriter, or I'm a technical writer, and that's part of my job, or I'm a sometimes product manager, that's part of my job, right?
Never,
It's
never, never is
It is
copy.
always the
Never
product
is
manager's
copy a
job.
part of the product manager's job.
It is always.
Sorry.
Hot button foe.
I love that hot button, and I wish more people believe that. However, I've certainly worked with startups that don't believe that, right? And so it's very, very similar for product ops, where you can, a lot of the things product ops does is about putting systems into place and synthesizing insights and putting structures in place where things are easily accessible so that people can make decisions and prioritize. And if you take a step back for a second and you think about a small startup that is maybe they've gotten to 20 million ARR and they've just got the small product team, well, who does that job? Well, the system design and the governance is by your product leaders. So it's typically your director of product management, maybe your director of product design, sometimes your VP of product. If you think about putting insights in place, that's typically your PMs because they normally don't have an analyst at that size. And so a lot of people are coming from that mindset where they've had to do it themselves. And so they feel like a core part of the value they bring is the structure they put in place as a leader, the accountability they put in place as a leader, the insights they derive as a designer or as a product manager that leads to something being committed to a roadmap that drives a customer outcome, right? It becomes very personal because people have historically owned these things in the past. And so part of the challenge that we run into is helping people understand that if you are willing to let go of that core components of your identity and you're willing to say, this does not define me at work, guess what? Your entire world opens up. And I've seen PMs, especially when they embrace product ops as a function, they suddenly spend all of this time in discovery. And the things and the outcomes they're able to put on a roadmap or customer problems that they can address, the magnitude of them just changes significantly because they're using their brain in a new way and they're using their brain in a different space. So rather than spending time doing a ton of deep analysis or a ton of time collecting customer interviews, they're using synthesized insights to make decisions and to understand market impact. And it fundamentally changes the way you do your job. Whether you're a designer who's trying to figure out, did I design the right thing? Or you're a product manager just trying to figure out, am I committing the right problem to the roadmap at the end of the day? So I normally overcome that resistance by building a lot of relationships. At the end of the day, this is a human-oriented role. Product Ops is here to take care of the people through systems. And so you have to know your people, you have to know your stakeholders, you have to know what they need, and then you've got to be able to help them find that buy-in moment where it's similar to product, right? You have a new user and they have an aha moment. They're into it and they're like, oh, I see the value. This is how it changes my life. Guess what? Y'all are our product. And so we need to get you to the aha moment at the end of the day. And so that's what we try to do. So we try to work with people so they can see what that value is for them, and they can work differently.
I'm
I love
sorry.
that.
I'm sorry that we are your product.
We're
Oh, I love it.
so sorry.
But bless
I
you.
thought.
But bless you.
I am not sorry in any way, to be clear.
You did say something a little bit ago, though, that is
Mhm.
kind of in juxtaposition to what you were just said. Like, I want to address the other side of it. You said you can be those extra set of hands. Product ops can be that extra set of hands. I have to think, though, in my past, when I've worked with product ops, I remember my first time working with product ops, I was like, this is a miracle. Like, miracles are being performed right in front of me. What do you mean I don't have to do this and you'll just do it, right? But at some point, people probably start to get pretty advantageous in their ass from product ops. So how have you seen that tipping scale in that all of a sudden you just start getting taken advantage of?
Mhm.
And what does that look like in your role?
Junk drawer syndrome. That's what we call it. It's junk drawer syndrome. And so what ends up happening is once people do buy in and they adopt, they start to realize, oh, well, maybe there's more that I can get rid of, right? It's exactly what you're talking about. It's that moment of, I don't like this part of my job, or this takes me too much time. And if Product Ops was able to operationalize this thing over here in a bucket, maybe they could operationalize this thing over here in a bucket. And so I normally combat that up front. I try to prevent junk drawer syndrome because I lived it at my first role when I set up the first product operations team. We became everything. Everything people didn't want to do landed on our plates, and that meant we didn't do a great job at the things we were actually responsible for doing, and we didn't deliver on our core values. So I normally start actually by doing roadshows with the team. Anytime I join an organization to set up product ops, I start by doing surveys with the team, understanding what their pain points are and where their true needs are, because the structure of product ops will differ just a little bit depending on the context of the organization. And then once I understand what those needs are, we draw very, very clear boxes around how product ops contributes. And again, they're back to really three things: business and data insights, customer and market insights, and processes and practices. It always comes back to those three pillars, no matter how you slice and dice it. And so I try to be very clear up front with leadership and then with stakeholders on the front lines around what do we do and what don't we do. And then help them figure out, if you are having this problem, it may not belong to product ops to solve, but how do you solve it? We can partner with you in figuring out how to solve it, but that does not make it our problem to solve. We're not the core owner of it. And so we're happy to partner on getting to a solution, but we're not going to take it over for you. And I found by setting those standards up front, it prohibits to a large degree junk drawer.
It's very similar to a product manager's job in that you can't execute on every single customer request.
Yes.
Because then you're just like chasing all these things. So you have to prioritize on what you believe will actually drive outcomes.
Well, not only prioritize, I mean, I hear boundaries. Like, you've got to set those boundaries and make them clear. And I, for one, am not great at boundaries. Anyone who has worked with me probably knows that about me. I am a yes person. So it is easy to set up expectation, but a lot of times I know just the way in which I operate, I can easily have boundaries crossed because I just don't even set them. But looking back, like, what are some of the most, just so other people who've never worked with product ops understands like what it is you don't do? What are some of those egregious asks that you think your team has been asked to make?
I'm not going to maintain your backlog for you. Dear product managers, love you dearly. Not going to do it. That's not my job. I'm not going to write your PRDs for you. Again, love you dearly.
Please.
Not my job.
Look at Claire's face,
Ooh,
just
I
like
know.
sinking the more.
Hey,
I know, but I'm so much worse at it than you. I promise. I promise. I'm just not that great.
you asked such good questions, though.
Yes, so that you can then write them. See, partnership. Partnership at the end of the day. Um, things like I'm not going to take on coaching your team members. And I say this to product leaders frequently. It is not my job to coach and develop your team leaders. I'll help you develop your competencies. If you are struggling to put an educational development program in place, I will give you the structure within which you can do that, but it is not my job to do that for you. I'm not here to manage your team for you. I'm also not here to drive your favorite shiny object initiative to completion because either you don't want to or you don't have the time to. It is still your job to drive those things. So really it falls into a couple places. Doing work for people that is their core job. So we're not here to manage backlogs or IPRDs. We are not here to coach and lead team members when it is your job to do so. And we're not here to drive shiny objects to the end of the day. We're also not here to go out and fight your battles cross-functionally. So product ops is inherently cross-functional. We kind of sit at the intersection of multiple teams. But when you are having conflict with somebody else, you need to go and engage that person on a person-to-person level, not try to get product ops to go and engage them for you. So we try to draw some clear boundaries around that and be explicit about what we just aren't in a position to do as a team.
Everything that you're saying right now, Fo, I'm like, I would be horrible at this role. Like I think I've done a lot of work in therapy with developing boundaries, but I would be so bad at this. Like I would just this sounds so hard.
And see, I
I
heard all
mean,
the things you don't do, and in my head, I'm like, so I probably should. You probably don't do prototypes either, right? Like, don't.
I mean, let's be clear. So I don't do these things because I have done these things, and I've seen the result of when I do these things, and it's never great. It's never great, right?
So you kind of said that a lot of times you've found yourself as that first individual really kicking off
Mm-hmm.
kind of the team, department,
Mm-hmm.
function, if you will. Um, how do you maintain? Um, do you find often that they look the same in every organization, or they have to bend towards what each organization is? Like
Mm-hmm.
how do you scale that from new company to new company?
Yeah, so it is inherently different. There are some core principles. I keep going back to those 3 pillars because they've been true for me in every company I've been in, but every team has looked somewhat different. And it's really because you have to understand the context on the ground for stakeholders. So what type of product are they building? What type of industry are they in? How are the rest of the teams structured? What are those teams charged with trying to do? And what is the business goal that we're trying to achieve at the end of the day? How you structure a product ops org is to amplify the existing product org to reach those goals. And so you have to adapt to what the actual structure looks like. I've had teams where we focused 90% of the effort on customer and market insights. I was working with a small fintech that worked on a lending product and on business and consumer account opening, and the entire team was hired to do what I would call voice of customer and voice of prospect. And so what they were doing was they were running deep research studies with prospects and with existing customers to be able to be certain that we were actually building the right product and adding the right functionality that was table stakes at the end of the day. And so they were direct partners embedded with design and with product management to make sure that we had the right insights at the right moment to make the right decision. And what that did by having those folks embedded, one in each product, it just sped up. It just dramatically sped up the rate at which we could deliver customer value at the end of the day. And so they served as this kind of optimization function by pulling those in, by doing the research interviews directly, by building those relationships. But then on the other side of the fence, I've built teams that are predominantly analysts, where we're looking at, because they did not need qualitative insights. They were not early stage products. We needed quantitative insights based on product usage, based on market usage, based on how we stack up against competitors. And so I've built teams that have been analysts that solely look at the quantitative data and match that up to the business insights. And so I've done both sides of the fence. It's about knowing the business you're working with and taking the time to do so. I think one of the biggest things that makes me successful as a product ops leader is when I go in, I meet the people and I find out what they're doing and I find out why they're doing it and I find out what's blocking them from being successful. And then you build the system to remove the blockers and to streamline what they're trying to do at the end of the day.
So coming into these teams, over your experience, is there, in your mind, is there like top level things that, even though you're taking the time to learn everybody, you have some things that are like prickling up? You're like, oh, no, we got a problem here. We got a problem here. Are there consistent themes that you see?
What are the
Yes.
problem themes?
What are the problem themes? There are consistent themes. It's always lovely. Almost every organization that I enter, you bring product ops in when you're ready to do a round of scaling, right? You don't bring product ops in for the sake of bringing them in because it's fun. You There won't be work for them to do. So you bring it when you're ready to scale, and you recognize as a business that maybe what got you to 50 million isn't going to get you to 100. And so things have to change. And product ops people are inherently system designers. We're coming in, we're designing systems for people. And so when we come in, we always start to look for the trends and the patterns. And almost always there's a problem with how we launch products. Almost always there's a problem with how we do discovery. Almost always there's a gap in the data coming in, whether that's from the business side or from the product side. Almost always there's a lack of a design system. Almost always there's a lack of a research practice. Those are the 5 things that always show up at pretty much every organization. And so I do admit I'm slightly biased. When I go in, these things are in the back of my head as little smoke signals that I'm looking for. There are always more than that. There are always more smoke signals than that, but those are always the 5 that haven't helped me show up every darn organization.
I want to unpack each one of those. So, I mean, because I know that there has to be just out of, people trying to move fast, they're not thinking about things. When it comes to launch, like, what are the things that you're super surprised for that seems like second nature to you, and then you come in and you're like, well, no, why are you doing that way? And it gives people these aha moments. Like, let's start with launch.
Launch in some ways is the easiest one because it's the fastest to fix, right? Very often when you start to scale, you move from having one way of doing things when you just had maybe 1 or 2 PMs and PMMs. And as you start to scale, you've got more bodies in the room. And so the breakage point you normally see in product launches is a failure to operationalize, which means that every PM and PMM pair starts to do it differently. And so everybody has their own special template, their own special way that they're convinced works. This is the way. And you talk across 7 or 8 pods and you look around and every one of them is doing something different. Guess what? You're putting so much strain on your marketing partners. You're putting strain on your enablement partners, on your CS partners. All those folks now have to receive information in different systems, in different ways of doing things, in different formats, right? And it just drastically changes how efficiently you can push something out. Also, inevitably, as I look across them, they're using different definitions of tiers for launches. So your standard definition, right, your industry definition across all SaaS, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, not surprising. I've seen everything from tier 5 to tier 1 going in the reverse across different pods at the same company, right? And so those are the types of things that we tend to see breakage points on, are people inventing their own unique special way of doing things because they are a snowflake, and then people following tiers that don't follow SaaS best practices at their core.
Okay, next, discovery.
Great, we'll go.
How militant.
I just hope you kept the record of everything that I said. That would be super helpful.
I've studied what you said. I'm going to walk through them. Let's see how I listened.
We'll find out very shortly. So when it comes to discovery, normally people move too far away from the customer. And I think we all 3 of us have seen this, I'm certain, at organizations we've been with, where you get to a certain size and you start to talk about the company. And you start to talk about the features, and you start to talk about the way we do things, right? And it becomes, this is our way. And it's all lovely. It's all lovely, and it's all coming from a really positive place. But guess what? If you are not centering your customer and your prospect and their problems in your discovery, you are going to fail. Because the only thing we're here to do is to deliver value to the customer so we can make money because we are a business. And so the biggest problem I see with discovery is, number 1, people don't do it because they believe that they're getting all the feedback that they need from CS. They don't actually talk to customers and prospects. Number 2, they start to think that they know everything because they've got a backlog of 457 items that have been collected over 4 years that they haven't done yet. So therefore I know everything. And they don't talk to customers to validate what they're doing. And then at the end of the day, they center themselves rather than the customer. And so I think you can talk a lot about being in continuous discovery. You can talk a lot about the various technical practices and tactics you can use, but it all comes back to discovery breaking down when you're not actually looking at the customer and thinking that you know best.
And focusing more, like when you're saying discovery, like defining a problem and not talking to customers, and then actually just seeing how it can be done in your system, essentially.
Correct. validating against an existing assumption that you have.
Oof.
I wish I didn't see it, but it happens a lot.
Well, yeah, there's the whole theory right now, especially in UXR, about like human-centered performance, right? We say that we're human-centered, but we're just saying that. That's all a performance. Because at the end of the day, what we're doing is validating our own assumption,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
We lack the ability to see our own assumptions and call out our own biases. And there's no check and balance in the system for it.
Yeah. I remember one time back in the day, another organization I was with, speaking of voice of the customer and validation, I was told I could not speak with customers because we did not want to look like we didn't know what we were doing.
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
That is such a shame.
Yeah, that we're not going to unpack that can of worms right now, but that's what
4 hours
popped into
later.
my head.
Was that at an agency, Mollie?
Could have been. I'm not going to give away any indicators as to where it may have been, but just another example of how if you're being told that yet you're doing discovery, you're not actually doing discovery.
Mhm.
So, okay, Claire, what was number 3?
Oh, I was hoping you wouldn't bring it back to that.
I believe it was design systems.
Design systems, yes. That's what I was going to say.
Was it?
Perfect. Perfect. So anti-patterns we see in design systems. Number 1, they don't exist. I think that's it. Does that tell you enough?
It's shocking. No, it is shocking. It's actually a question I ask in a lot of interviews, like how well-rounded, tell me about the maturity level of your design system, how many people work, like tell me all the things. And it's always is blown out of proportion the right word? It's always exaggerated at how put together and well thought out it is. And then it seems like inevitably every single time I join, it's like, wait, what? This is what you're doing as a design system. So it's interesting to hear you say that you feel you run into that as well.
Frequently. Actually, to be honest, I'm always surprised when one exists because I feel like a lot of organizations I join are just running so fast to try to deliver value, to try to catch that next wave, especially if they're a first wave catcher in that category. They're just trying to consistently produce value to keep people interested. And they don't think about the long-term effects of not having consistency from a user experience perspective. And very often at these organizations, there isn't anybody who is deeply focused on user experience. And so I don't think it occurs to organizations that one is necessary and that having a design system will actually make you move faster and with better quality over time. And so I think this gap largely comes inadvertently. And the minute organizations have one in place and they're like, oh, it's this kind of like light bulb on moment when they see just how much the speed improves, the quality improves in the product delivery lifecycle.
Yeah, it's I think a difficult thing about design systems too, you just said it, like we're really focused on delivering value to the customer. So as an organization and as a company, we can meet our own goals. And so oftentimes I find and hear that design systems are seen as a cost center more than anything. When, as you just pointed out, it actually helps with that speed, efficiency, consistency, reduces debt. But I'm going to get off my soapbox of design systems. I could make this whole rest of the episode about that. But I find that fascinating that you see the same walking into organizations.
Yeah, and quite frankly, if I walked in at a more mature organization that was at, I don't know, 120 million, I probably wouldn't see it because I wouldn't own design ops, right? That would be its own bucket, and they would already be seeing that. But it's more organization, it's immediately apparent.
So what is that? I mean, we've heard, 20 million company, that 50 million company, 120 million company. What is that sweet spot? You said at some point, you're scaling. Did you just get a Series C? Are you scaling? Are you at a certain ARR number? Like, what is that sweet spot when you can say, you know what, now is the time for product ops?
Yeah, I try not to attach it to funding rounds because every organization is funded a little bit differently. And when you attach it to funding rounds, like you look at a Series B companies and it just is massively different between all of them, what they've been able to produce, where they are in market, what their customer base looks like. I tend to attach it closer to ARR because then you've got an idea of the size of the customer portfolio. You've got an idea of the number of people it takes to likely support that customer portfolio. And so I attach it to, typically I want to see the first like product operations manager come in right around 50 million. That's normally at the point where you've got a solid product leadership team. They're probably spread a little bit thinner than you want them to be spread. They're probably fighting fires all day long, trying to develop their teams, trying to just get value out at the end of the day. And they're probably stretched a bit too thin to start looking at the systems, right? And they don't have the bandwidth to start thinking about how to automate things like business, market, and customer insights. So that's normally the point where I see your first person come in. Typically, it's a little bit larger when you start to build your team. So normally, like ballpark, 60, 70 million before I'd start adding people to the team. And normally I start by adding an analyst, because analysts are the folks that are going to add the largest value the fastest to the rest of the team.
Do you hear
And
that,
then
analysts? Do you hear that?
product analysts, come my way.
So okay,
Mhm.
in your experience, where does product ops typically sit from like an organizational structure?
Oh, that's a spicy question. I've had that one a couple times this week, actually. So traditionally, product ops operations is going to sit within your product org, and it is going to report to your VP of products or your CPO, depending on your organizational structure. However, I've also sat in the seat where I've spanned both product and engineering, and I've done product and engineering operations. And then I've either reported into a CTO or I've had dual reporting, which is terrible. Let me tell you, I don't love dual reporting, but out to VP of product and VP of engineering. Ideally, I would love to see it just sit in product. I think product ops is there to maximize the impact of a product org. And so it needs to be its own independent function within product. So it's got a little bit of autonomy, but it's also matrixed across the rest of the org for maximum impact.
And working across working with these different departments, do you typically see more or less resistance across them, or is it just kind of like depending on the organization?
I think it depends on the organization and where their strengths are. I've definitely been in an organization where design had not gotten any attention for multiple years, and the designers were so darn hungry for systems, for structure, for process, for ways of working. And so they were the low-hanging fruit. They were the folks that I worked with first to just get the basics in place so that they could be more efficient and they could be happier in what they're doing, and therefore they could focus on the bigger problems. In other organizations where there is kind of equal pain, I tend to gravitate towards product management first, largely because I will find more resistance in product management. Product managers, don't make that face. You know it's true.
No, that was a guilty face. That was a guilty face.
Claire often has the product manager face. So
Well, it comes with the title, doesn't it?
It does.
You inherit it.
We do.
But if you think about that stage where product managers were told you're a mini CEO. I mean, you'll remember that stage.
Biggest
And
gripe.
that is Claire's another hot button. Fo. Yep.
It's not true. It's not true. We all know that it's not true. You can't be a mini CEO inherently, even if you're in a product-led organization. It's just not a reality. It's an aspirational vision to tell people to think about the business holistically. But people have taken it very, very literally. And so what I've seen with PMs is they become locked into this idea that I own everything, I decide everything, I do everything. You shouldn't tell me what to do. You shouldn't try to put systems in place because that interferes with my way of working. And it's my way of the highway is what I hear a lot. So I typically, if they're equal pain points, I will start by spending time with product managers to understand why they feel that way and where those sticking points are, so we can just pop them out of them slowly, one by one, and find a better way of living.
Pop away, Fo. Pop. I'm here for it. I'm here for it. I really do. I hate the sentiment around telling PMs that they're the mini CEOs, because to your point, it's not true. It's a farce. They're not. And it does like create this dynamic. My suspicion is people can say that, yes, aspirationally, but it's also just kind of like, you're the fall guy now. You know, you're the fall guy for when anything goes wrong. And so I think that I've really had to push myself out of that thinking, because I think that PMs can commonly think that, okay, you're telling me I'm the CEO, so I'm the fall guy. So then you just try and hold on to anything that you think is within your control. And it's just a really, really bad, it breeds bad culture, bad team dynamics, and I could go on and on. We won't.
Yeah. No, I mean, it produces two flavors of PMs, right? Either those that seek the control that you seek because they feel like they're constantly under a microscope, or those that feel like I'm empowered, I'm going to make decisions, and they make a bunch of business decisions that they probably shouldn't have made in the first place that have just ripple effects they can't even see from the seat that they sit in. Neither one is a
All the
good thing.
meanwhile, not doing discovery and customer validation, right? So it
True.
all just is a vicious circle. The
Hmm.
tangled
Yeah,
webs we
these
weave.
these are they're product anti
Yeah,
patterns, right?
yeah.
They happen everywhere.
So I'm hearing a trend as well. Just, it kind of product ops is seen differently at different organizations.
Hmm.
People can cross boundaries very quickly. All of a sudden, scale up so many things on your plate that shouldn't actually be on your plate. So what I'm hearing is this
Hmm.
can often be a very misunderstood field,
Hmm.
right? So how can people educate themselves to better understand the value, and how
Hmm.
to best utilize, not just product ops, but
Hmm.
really all the roles within product, right? How do we become better
Yeah.
teammates, Fo? I'm now asking you to lead my teams.
I will
Sorry.
happily come in and talk to your teams. Happily, as you are well aware. Chat with them all day long. Um, I think at the end of the day, it comes to seeking to understand. It's a phrase I picked up probably a decade ago, but we need to seek to understand the perspectives and the experiences of others, right? And if you don't know what something is, you are beholden as a professional to educate yourself. There are so many resources out there, from podcasts to content producers. And I don't care whether you're talking about design or product management or product ops, there is a plethora of information out there. And so I think when we talk about roles that are misunderstood, each of us inherently, no matter what seat we're in, is responsible for seeking to understand others and coming to the table to be a better partner to everybody else on the team. That being said, it does not stop people from misunderstanding product ops. And so I spend a tremendous amount of time helping stakeholders draw the connections, connect the dots, figure out where their value is in what product ops is doing and where they can let something go. And this goes from everything from roadshows to individual conversations to sending somebody a podcast to listen to I've mailed this book out so many
I do love
times.
Melissa Perry. When you
Melissa
say
Perry
this
is
book, what
fabulous.
book is that, Fo? It
This is a book called Product Operations: How Successful Companies Build Better Products at Scale. And the model that they use is really, really similar to the model that I use for product ops. And when this crossed my desk last year, I was like, oh, it's like you wrote about me. And it was fantastic. So what I've done is I used to have all of these like one-on-one conversations and deep empathy and seek to find people. Now I just mail them a bloody book and say, please read this.
that
Your life will get
that is
better.
your answer. Do you guys remember back in the day that I still I use it with my mom. I hope she's not listening. But back in the day, I've used the let me Google that for you.com. Have you all seen that website? Somebody asks a question and you literally put in let me Google that for you.com and it sends you a video of them, a video and instructions on how to Google their question. So that anyway, you sending somebody that book made me laugh because that's
Mhm.
your way of saying, let me Google that for you.
It's slightly passive aggressive, but also
Yes,
beneficial.
1000%.
And also, listener, if you want to send Melissa Perry a message on LinkedIn and tell them about our podcast and we'd love to have her on as a guest, please feel emboldened to do so.
Nice plug, Claire.
Applause, because she's fabulous.
So, Fo, how do you just in that whole aspect? I
Mhm.
mean, there's all of us have those areas of the jobs that we
Mhm.
do on a daily basis that keeps it hard to stay motivated. But I can
Mhm.
understand and appreciate that being misunderstood could be one of those points. How do you personally stay motivated in an area that is so often misunderstood?
Mhm. It's hard. I'm human. There are times when I'm demotivated and I feel a little bit jaded, but at the end of the day, despite being a very, very deep introvert, I'm also a very human oriented person. And so, largely for me, what motivates me is the people because I know I can make change and I know the value of the change I can make. And so, being connected to the people and seeing the change is largely what keeps me motivated. That, and I also know how to drive a bloody business outcome. And between those two things, I can get enough to keep me going through the parts that are hard, because there are always going to be parts that are hard. We work in technology. Sometimes I wonder why, but we do. And because we do, like you've got to kind of go with the roller coaster. But when you kind of get to the bottom of the roller coaster, it's always the people and the business outcomes that keep me coming back for more at the end of the day. Because you've got to work with spectacular humans. And if you don't, you should go and find some spectacular humans. There are lots of us out there.
You do, but tech is so hard. It is. I often find myself, have you guys ever been at a party and somebody asks what you do? and you say like, hey, I'm in tech, and they say, well, what in tech? I just don't have the energy to even go any further. I'm like,
Yes.
that energy was spent today at my job. I'm in tech. Let's leave it at that.
Yeah. This is good enough. Can we talk about
Can
gardening?
we,
I would love to talk about
yes, can we
gardening.
move on?
To this day, I still like, I tried to develop a pitch in those situations of like something super quick and succinct. And to this day, I haven't found one that's really hit. I did one time tell somebody, I was like, do you use Instagram? And this is kind of like this was a far correlation, but stick with me. I was like, do you use Instagram? They're like, yeah. And I was like, when Instagram, all of a sudden you open your app and there's a new feature, and they were like, oh yeah. And I was like, I work on the teams that build those. And they're like, cool.
Oh, that's good.
So that was the only thing that worked for me to this day. So
yeah, find your favorite tool.
Yeah,
make it
They'll build the
relevant to
correlation.
them.
I just
Yep,
often find
that's
too,
it.
some people's face, like if I say they say, what do you do? I'm a designer. And they're like, well, what kind of designer? If I say software, and their face just like, just completely melts, and they lose interest immediately. I just say, yeah, I work on computers, right? Like that's my default. I work in computers. I'm IT.
I'm
I'm
IT.
IT, basically. Ask my mom. That's what I do. Sorry, I've called out my mom,
I mean,
my
Mollie.
poor mother, if she's listening to this.
Oh, we love you, Mollie's mom. We're sorry.
So, Fo, I do want to ask though, Claire and I love some good gripes. We love some hot buttons. I've pointed out several of them that you have said that are Claire's hot buttons. What are your hot buttons? What have you had it with in product ops?
Oof. That's spicy.
Yeah.
I am really, really over people who don't do anything with the insights we provide you, especially when they come along with a bloody set of recommended actions. We literally made this kindergarten level complicated, and you still aren't doing anything. That's a hot button for me. Like, how much easier do I need to make your job? This is where we cross that boundary, right? Do I need to do your job for you?
I've provided these. Damn it, I'll just do it. Okay.
Correct. Right. And so then you do some self-management, but yeah, that one gets me real hot, real fast, because it is ridiculous.
Insights are hard too. Like if somebody provided me synthesized insights, or especially with action recommendations, you bet your ass I'm going to use that, right? But because
Right.
I mean, right now myself, I see a feed of so many companies I go into, I see insights, and it's just this feed of hundreds of insights. And it's like, well, what do you even do with that? Right. So those are easy to ignore.
How do you know?
But if you give me something that's not easy to ignore, man, if you just ignore it, that's on you. Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Clearly you won't ignore
I
me.
won't ignore you, but Claire's being suspiciously silent. So
I would never ignore you, Fo. I've never done that.
I've never done that.
So that's the first one. There is a second one. So when you work in product ops, you kind of touch a bit of everything. We're generalists, right? So we can do a little bit of design, we can do a little bit of product management, we do a whole lot of analytics. But that means we pick up a ton of like frameworks and tools and practices and tactics along the way. And so if we come to you and we say, this could help you, you really need personas. You really need jobs to be done. You really need North Star metrics. And you look at me and you say, we don't need those things. And then I tell you why you desperately need them and how it's going to make your life better. And you say, I don't have time for that. That's going to piss me off as well.
I'm pissed
That's
off
another
just
hot
hearing
button
it.
for me.
Like, but although, Fo, you know me better than anyone. Personas, jobs to be done, activation. You're speaking my language. So when people say we don't need it, that's a shiver down my spine.
It's wild, but they do.
It's wild. Yeah, there's a whole.
I think we need those. I know we need those.
Well, yeah, but there is a whole trend I have seen over the last several months on LinkedIn. This whole trend of why personas are bad, and like we don't need personas, and personas are just fictionalized. Yes, I agree. Like they are fictionalized things, but they are representative of your actual people. But to make them useful, it is a whole framework. It is one bigger piece of the puzzle. So when I see these posts of people saying, oh, they're unnecessary, well, then you don't know how to actually use them, and you're not in an organization that uses them properly and as a framework for a catalyst for growth. Anyway, That's a hot button for me, apparently.
Next
Yeah.
take. Hot buttons.
Hot buttons, personas. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. So I also have to say, Fo, I've been looking at your dog behind you for the better part of almost all this, and it looks like you've put him in timeout, FYI. He just is laying face on the corner.
So he puts himself in timeout. So his name is Harry. He is an American Pit Bull Terrier, a senior, and he very much wants attention right now. He thinks it is dinner time and or wants to play in the garden, and he is getting neither of those things at this moment. So he has put himself in timeout to manage himself, and he points his face into the corner so that he doesn't have to interact with us, because otherwise he's like, but what about me? So this is how he manages himself. Big feelings. And then he chomps on his like rubber bone.
What
Very
an
loudly.
emotionally regulated dog.
I don't know if that part is true, but he's trying real hard right now. Real hard.
I love the emotional
impressed.
regulation. Totally. Mine just like stare at me. Like, yeah. So
The staring face was an hour ago.
So, Fo, last question for me. You did say just a little bit ago you'd rather talk about gardening. Tell me one thing about gardening that's just mind-blowing in your world.
That's mind-blowing in my world. Oh, dear God. Well, it's not necessarily mind-blowing in like the grand scheme of gardening, but I have now reached 17 indoor houseplants, and my wife has not been able to stop me. I have
Are
a
they
shirt that
all
says-
alive?
They're all alive. I have a shirt that says "Never enough plants," and I bought that for myself. She did not buy that for me. Let's be clear. But she was away traveling a couple weeks ago and came back to 4 new plants that just mysteriously like made their way into the house, and we don't know why. And several more plants that split themselves into new plants. So it's just miraculous in my world is the continued growth that I get away with that is right now unchecked. She's going to come in here and stop me in a moment and tell me absolutely not.
I
But
heard plants. I heard more. I thought this was
Yes,
a
that's
podcast. You're
that's
ordering
dinner.
plants, aren't you?
That will be the dinner table conversation. Guarantee it.
Fantastic. Claire, anything from your side? Any things left in question?
This has just been so great, Fo. Thank you so much. I do have a lot of other questions for you. Like I want to dig into some more of that, but this has been super helpful. It's fascinating talking to someone like you who has just watched all of us idiots make all these mistakes. I mean, it's fascinating.
I will say none of you are idiots. I've only worked with incredibly smart humans. Just you can't see everything.
We just don't have as
So it
good
helps
of
when somebody else
emotional
does.
regulation as your dog. So
Potentially.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Fo. Much appreciated. I'd love to see an episode in the future where we have a PM, a PD, a product ops, and a PMM all sit down together and hash it out. That would be phenomenal.
I love that idea. That sounds
maybe one
brilliant.
day we will knock on your door again. But until then, really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for tuning into this week's episode. If you enjoyed it, be sure to subscribe and leave a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And if you'd like to connect with us, check out our website at bouncepodcast.com.